and welcome to Understanding the Media. I'm thrilled to be with you today to share some things that I've learned along the way about working with members of the news media. I'm Anita Foster. I work for the Arlington ISD in communications and marketing. I've been there since 2019. Before that, I spent 20 years of my career responding to emergencies large and small across America as a public information officer with the American Red Cross. Most of my career has been spent in front of news media during many breaking news stories. I started my career with a church shooting of children, and ended pretty much my career at the Dallas police officer shooting in downtown Dallas. I've responded to countless tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires in communities all across America. I was one of the first on the ground in the public information capacity in New York City after 9/11. The town of West, just south of Dallas-Fort Worth and just north of Waco, had a terrible fertilizer plant explosion that actually made global news in a very small community in Texas. And I responded to those. Lots and lots of responses to the pandemic. I think like all of us, we've been dealing with that for the last few years. And so the news media stories have been consistent and they've been changing over time. So we've had to stay on top of that messaging, on top of that emergency messaging throughout all of the pandemic. So for today, what I really want to talk about are some things that we can do to make sure that when a crisis happens at your company now or your future company, that you're as prepared as possible to respond. And essentially, emergencies take on 3 stages. And I call them the calm before the storm, the hair on fire stage, and then the I'm going to need a vacation stage. All of these stages occur in every emergency. And there are things that we can do in each stage to make sure that we are fully ready to respond to the news media. During our calm before the storm phase, this might seem like the time to kind of relax and just not worry about things, but it's exactly the opposite. This is the time that we need to be doing a lot of work. One of the first things that we can do during the calm before the storm phase is understand our newsrooms. If you haven't interned in news or worked in news or had a lot of familiarity with how the news gets made, that is lesson number 1. To be effective in crisis communications, we have to know who we're dealing with on the other side of those microphones or the other side of those phone calls. And that starts with understanding who are the players in the newsroom and how do they make decisions about how the news actually gets made. The second thing that we can do during our calm before the storm phase is take a risk assessment of your business. You want to plan around some of the worst case scenarios, and I'll give you some examples of those. And then the third thing is a rinse and repeat. You want to do it every single day, and that's always be building relationships with the news media. And this includes your online news sources as well. Relationships are everything. You're going to hear me say that repeatedly. I feel that's in your coursework a lot as well, because it will be a saving grace to you to know how the news gets made, have a working plan in place, and have strong relationships with the media because they are going to come a knocking at some point during your career. So when we talk about like how the news gets made, I want to start with knowing who the players are, who's in the newsroom. And this can be different if you're talking about print or broadcast or online or podcast or whatever it is, but you need to know who those players are that are in the newsroom. In a typical newsroom and broadcast, you've got your assignment editors, there are reporters, you've got producers, there are news directors, anchors, meteorologists, all these different players that are in the newsroom, and everyone has a very specific role to play. And so I want you to know what those roles are. A few tips for you, especially if you haven't worked with news very often. A lot of PR people, when an emergency occurs, will call me and they'll say, oh gosh, this is breaking in my business, and I don't know how to reach, the news desk at 10 o'clock at night. and they'll ask me for that information. I want you to know during breaking news, you want to go to the assignment editor, not to the reporters that you have relationships with. Those are important relationships and you want to keep them very solid. But in a breaking news emergency, you don't know who's on duty. So you want to make sure that you're planning, it's the assignment desk that I need to talk to you in the beginning of an emergency. We had a phrase that we always used at the Red Cross that said, we don't want to swap business cards in debris fields. We want to know who the media are, who the players are, who are your shooters, your photographers, who are the reporters, who's doing the editing, who's bringing the satellite truck. We want to know all of that. Plus, we want to know other public information officers from other industries that affect ours. So you want to get your relationships built, swap those business cards before the emergency occurs. And then the last tip I have, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in just a few minutes, but that is to create the world's best media list and keep it updated. You want to be current at all times when it comes to working with members of the news media. And so let's talk a little bit about how the news actually gets on the air. How do reporters learn about stories? How do they get information? One of the biggest ways is people call the news media. If you work in PR now or you plan on it, know your own people are going to call the media. If your business makes an unpopular decision that someone in your business doesn't like, they will call typically the news station they watch. They don't necessarily know how to do a whole media call down or write a press release and send it out over the wire, but they know whose news they watch, and they will often call and let the news media know they're unhappy with the decision your business made. I'll give you an example from my business last week. So we have started school. We're about 4 weeks in, not unusual during this time to move some teachers around because of class sizes. So for example, at one campus, we had factored that we needed 3 teachers for kindergarten. So 3 kindergarten classes, 22 kids per class. Well, they only had 2 full classes, but a few schools down the road, we had more students than we had teachers. So we moved a teacher from school A to school B to essentially level out the HR mechanism. And that ended up on the news as a story that we had to field. Was it a crisis? No. Could it have become one over time with the shuffling of teachers, possibly during a teacher shortage? So just know, sometimes it's your own people or someone from the community or someone who does business with you that will just let the media know something they're unhappy about. And if it's juicy enough, they will call you and want to know more information about that. Social media conversations are a huge way media find out about stories they might want to put on the air. So if you're seeing something on social media about your business, you can factor that the media are seeing that same information as well. Also, sources, those are still real. It may not feel like it from old school media days when everything had to come through a source, but media still use certain sources today. And so they can hear about it from one of their sources. They can also see a story on another news outlet and then want to cover it on their news outlet. That could be print, it could be radio, it could be online, broadcast, it doesn't matter. This happens all the time. I actually have an example of this for you that happened in our school district in May of this year. So this story was from Fox 4 locally, and you can see this was 9:04 p.m. and the headline, Arlington ISD fires substitute teacher after using racial slur in front of elementary students. I don't know about y'all, but this is not a phone call you want to receive at any point in your career. But I got it, and I got it from a reporter, Macy Jenkins, who works at Fox 4. She's been in the market about 5 years. We have a very good relationship. We've always had a good relationship. But she texted me at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and asked me if this had happened. And I had no idea if this had happened or not. I didn't know anything. The only information that she had was a parent called the newsroom and said a teacher used a racial slur at the school. I asked Macy, it's about 3 in the afternoon, understanding the news cycle and how the news gets made. I know she works the night side, which means she covers her stories for the 9 p.m. and the 10 p.m. broadcast. They're often going to get replayed on the early morning news the next morning. So when she sent me this text at about 3 in the afternoon, I knew she was just arriving to work and this was going to be her story of the day, whether we wanted this on the air or not. And so I asked Macy to give me 30 minutes right off the bat. I didn't know if this had happened. I didn't know if it was a teacher. I didn't know what school. And so we started the investigation. So I went immediately to HR, worked with them, and they had identified the school. They knew now that it was a substitute teacher. We did not know that even in the beginning. So I was able to go back to Macy within that 30 minutes and say, listen, it looks like this has occurred. We have a little bit more research to do. Can you give me 1 hour and I'll get you a written statement? And she did not want to, and I understand, because during that time, they want to go out and stand in front of our school and interview parents at the end of the school day. I get that. They also want to shoot their teasers, those stand-ups, so that they can do the cut-ins before the 9 o'clock news. Breaking news from Arlington: a substitute teacher has been fired or has used the N-word. What I wanted to do in that hour was confirm with HR what they were going to do. And so they had let me know that they were going to the school. So the HR team was on the way to the campus, and they thought within the hour they could give me a solid decision on whether or not this had occurred. And if it had occurred, we all knew that the substitute teacher would be terminated. And so I tried to buy just a little bit more time, and Macy allowed us to do that. And then within that hour, I got her the written statement. It did make the 9 o'clock news that night. And I will tell y'all, within 5 minutes or less of that story finishing on Fox 4 on that evening, 2 other stations texted me looking for a statement for their 10 p.m. newscast. And it didn't end there. And I tell you this story because it won't end for you either. We work in sort of a domino effect, if you will. So when news makes one station and it's a news story that's got some bite to it, other stations watch each other's news. They're going to see the story on one station and then they're going to contact you. And I know this might be a little small to read, but this was just a Google screenshot I took of this story, and it was still active 2 days later. So it took 2 days for print to catch up. So broadcast got it first, television. The next day we did a bunch of talk radio or were included in those stories. And then the following day it hit print in the newspapers. So that was all of our major broadcast stations, all of our major talk radio stations, and both major newspapers. Took 3 days, but this story got covered across the board. This is not comfortable when this happens as a crisis communicator. This is not something you want to have to deal with, but you need to know that it's happening. It's very common. And my biggest tip on this would be consistency with your message. Even if it's 3 days later and you have all kinds of new information, try to stay very consistent with the first message you put out so that you're showing that across this domino effect. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. In every newsroom, they're watching everyone else's news. And so when you have a story hit one station, don't be alarmed if you start hearing from all of the others. And so one of the other things I wanted to talk about is what the media wants from you. This is really fairly easy, not easy to do, but easy to prepare for. What do they want from you? They want to know the 5 W's. We all learned them in elementary school. Who, what, where, when, why, and then of course you can add the how. But they want to know what's going on. What do you know about this? What should we know about this? What should the public know about this? So they're going to ask you a lot of questions that start with the letter W. And so you want to be prepared for those. And that preparedness starts with taking a comprehensive risk assessment for your business. We all work in different industries. And so your risk assessment is going to look different, but I'll give you a couple of tips and I'll say it again. Always have employee behavior on your risk assessment. maybe pick 5 things that could happen in your industry and then do a risk assessment before they happen. Maybe you work in, let's say, rail transportation, intermodal or something. You might be dealing with a potential hazardous cargo accident. Maybe your train derails and it has hazardous materials on board. That's something you need to be prepared for in advance. Or maybe it's a passenger rail and you've got passengers on board. That's going to be a different kind of response, but you need to be prepared for it. You might be maybe in pharmaceuticals or consumer goods and a product goes bad. Maybe it becomes a harmful product to people and you have to handle that. That is very tedious, but you want to make sure that you're thinking about all of your worst case scenarios before they happen. And I'll give you just a quick look at a sheet that we use in our worst case scenario with our crisis team at the school district. So we will create the worst case scenarios, we'll create practice interview questions, and we'll drill each other all the time. Now, we know school shootings are in the news every day. We talk about it every day. It's on social media. We understand the importance of that. We've got good plans. We say very candidly in our messaging that we cannot guarantee that an event will not occur at one of our schools, but we can guarantee that we have plans in place to respond. But here's our worst case scenario with the school shooting. What if a group of people got together and decided to do a simultaneous active shooter on every one of our high school campuses? That's a lot to deal with. Do we have the manpower to respond to that? Do we have enough communicators? Do we have enough people trained in emergency response? Can the police respond to all of that? There's a ton of questions that arise from that scenario. It's one that we practice. Another one is if a fire occurs and tons of our teachers and students are trapped in a building. And then we think often about maybe it's a school bus driver that is on a suicide mission and they drive a bus full of school kids purposefully into one of our school buildings. And, what kinds of questions would we be expected to answer? Everything from background checks. Did you know the mental health status? Did you know this was coming? How long has this person worked here? What did the other employees say about them? There are a ton of things that we know we would have to answer that we may not have the answers for, but we need to know we're going to get asked. And so this is just a quick example of some of the worst case scenarios that we practice in the school district. And in your business, practice those too. As I mentioned, employee bad behavior is often the reason your business is going to be in a crisis. Maybe the FBI showed up and they're taking files out of your CEO's office. Or in this case, this is the New York Post headline because, it's the New York Post. Saucy Red Cross boss tossed was the national CEO of the American National Red Cross that had an inappropriate relationship with one of our coworkers in Mississippi. So the next headline that I unfortunately didn't save, but was the saucy boss took a ride on the Mississippi Queen or something like that. It was just, it's New York Post. Hopefully your employee bad behavior stories don't end up in national news, but they could. So be prepared. Employee misconduct is the reason most of your stories are going to make it. So think about that. Think about how you would respond if someone in your top administration or a member of your board of directors behave badly. What are the questions that you can be prepared to answer? Some of the biggest reasons for crisis in business outside of employee bad behavior is just Mother Nature. Being a disaster responder for so many years, I saw this up close and personal time and time again. And you could tell a company that was prepared and a company that was not prepared when their business was lost during emergencies. This may not look like it, but it used to be the Wrangler manufacturing plant where they make your denim jeans and apparel items. This is in a tiny town in Alabama called Hackleburg. This was the number one employer, not just in the town of Hackleburg, but in the entire northern Alabama region. This town consisted pretty much of the Wrangler manufacturing plant, a couple hundred homes, a Piggly Wiggly, and that was about it, maybe one school. And so when this tornado destroyed the Wrangler manufacturing plant, they were at a complete loss. So, they're in the middle of Alabama. Wrangler's a big company. I'm not sure where they're headquartered at, but it was not Hackleburg, Alabama. It was just a manufacturing plant. So it took some time for the information from their corporate to trickle down because no one in this town had electricity. The town was literally pretty much wiped off the map. It was a very, very deadly tornado across Alabama. Entire outbreak, about 300 people died, very severe. And so if you were the crisis communicator for Wrangler and you're doing your plan in advance, what kinds of questions would you have on your practice interviews? What would you be asking? The first thing might be, does this plant operate 24/7? So if you're with the Wrangler Manufacturing Company, you need to know which of my plants operate 24/7 because it informs you immediately during an emergency whether or not people were at work. One of the first questions media will ask, one of the first things they want to know, who was there? Did anyone die? You won't know that in your planning, but you'll know that there's a potential for that if you know your plant operates 24/7. You also want to make sure that you know what happens to people if their business is destroyed. What happens to the people who worked here? This was the largest manufacturer, and now no one in the town has a job. So they're going to look to the largest employer and start asking questions, and media are going to ask you too. So just do your best to ask and answer these really hard questions beforehand. This is actually the QVC, the people who sell all kinds of goods on television. This is one of their manufacturing plants, their warehouse locations in North Carolina. And this was recent. This was just this past December. A massive fire broke out at this plant. It destroyed 1.2 million square feet of their warehouse space. So I've been following this pretty closely, just looking at how they responded. My assumption would be from their speed, their accuracy, and their ongoing communication, this type of an emergency is something they thought about before. Pretty quickly, they were reporting 300 people worked there. It was a 24/7 location. We knew that one of their employees did die in this fire. What they didn't know at the time is what they would do afterwards. And so they stuck with their key messaging in the beginning on how they were helping their employees. Put yourself in the driver's seat of this. Once you get past the human emergency, what are the questions you might need to think about in your risk assessment ahead of time? It might be things like, well, what does happen to employees? This also major employer in this community. Do you stay? Do you move after your location is destroyed? What would you do? What about memorials? How do you handle fatalities? What would happen if? That's what you want to glean when you're doing your risk assessment. So think about maybe 5 terrible scenarios that could happen in the industry that you work in or the one that you want to work in, and think through those hard questions and what you would do if. And then the last thing during the calm before the storm is relationships, relationships, relationships. It's all about your relationships with the news media. They are not the enemy. And you know that because you're taking this course, but a lot of people in your business might think they are. And it's just simply not the case. When something is newsworthy, it's going to make the news. The relationships that you have will not prevent a crisis story from making the air. But what it can do is help you get your information out the way you want to get it out. And that is very important because without a doubt, it's going to happen. A crisis is going to occur. The media is going to show up and your hair is going to be on fire. And I get this a lot. And people say, oh my gosh, they call me when their hair is on fire. Anita, I don't know what to do first. This is often the hardest part during a crisis. What do I do first? When you understand how the media works, then you can make good first decisions. The first step every single time, without a doubt, is verify your information from more than one source. You're going to hear things are going to post on social media, and it's going to be chaotic and emotional. And I just want you to remember that doesn't make it true. So verify your information from more than one source, and you'll know who those sources are, but just verify. That way you get your emergency started with the right message. And then the second step is a holding statement. This is important because it allows you to buy some time while you're doing more fact checking, information gathering. This is an example of a holding statement for, sadly, one of our students that was shot in 2019 shortly after school and off campus. And so our superintendent issued a holding statement. We demonstrated empathy for our student. We said what happened. All media were asking us the name of the student. Who's the student? What happened? Da, da, da. And we were not going to put that name out that night. There's a lot that goes into announcing fatalities, and it is not our place as a school district to do that. So we just let the media know that for tonight, we will not be releasing names. We let them know the police department was investigating. We called off football for that evening, and we shared that counselors would be coming to the school, and then we ended with an empathy statement. That's just an example of a holding statement. It allows you to put something out fairly quickly. It doesn't have to be every piece of information, just what you know at that moment. And then you can work on your messaging plan. So then you're going to pick your spokespeople, make sure that the field is covered. And by that, I mean, if you're at a warehouse like QVC or the Wrangler plant, that's where the media is going. They're going to that location. So you want to make sure that you have adequate coverage to be able to be on the ground and be eyes and ears. You want to report your own bad news if you can. Manage all the rumor control, which is a lot easier said than done, especially on social media. So make sure you've got good spokespeople looking at social media too. And then importantly, it's chaos. Emergencies by their very nature are chaos. Crisis communication stories are chaos. You're probably going to make mistakes, and that's okay. If you mess something up, just fess up and then immediately fix it. So if you mess up, fess up, and then fix it. I talked a little bit about covering the field, and I wanted to show you just a couple of images from large-scale emergencies where media showed up to in large numbers. This is kind of what we talked about in the Red Cross, a satellite city. So you've got tons of satellite trucks that all show up from all over the place, locally, regionally. If your story is big enough, then you're going to get national crews coming out as well. And I want to give you just one tip about national media. In case you need to know this, always work with your local reporters first. That might seem counterintuitive because you've got, CNN is on the ground with you, but your local reporters were there before. They're who you have relationships with, and they're going to be there long after the national media pulls cable and they're off to the next assignment. So keep them satisfied, but your local reporters, your local media will continue to be the ones that you need to understand the most. This image, and I brought it to you because if you look closely on the satellite truck behind the memorial, that is a CNN truck, and this is in downtown Dallas. The national news media have satellite trucks or will have access to satellite trucks from Dallas. So all of your big national news stations have satellite offices in the Dallas area, or they're very close by, but most of them are actually in Dallas. I think NBC National might be in Fort Worth, but let's not split hairs. They're local and they're going to be here fast. If you have something in your business and you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area or a major news market, Dallas-Fort Worth is the 5th largest news market in the country. And so they position here. It's easy for them to get to the coastline for hurricanes, to get to airports to fly. It just makes sense. So they were right in Dallas when this is the Dallas police officers shooting memorial. And my team did manage this memorial, and you can see another national news truck just over on the left as well. They were all over the place. but we just kept our relationships with our local media first. And so just keep those tips in mind. And then you're going to work your way through the crisis. And I promise you, you're never going to need a vacation more than when you come out of a big crisis event. In full candor, they are emotional. It's physically exhausting, emotionally exhausting, spiritually exhausting, and you are going to want to take a break because you've had to be on, you've had to do tons of media messaging, tons of collaboration with your team. You're going to want to take that vacation, but I want you to do a couple of things before you go on vacation, and that is an after action review. Make sure you're looking at what happened, why it happened, how do you do it better next time? So join together with your communications team, with your attorneys, with your CEOs, whoever it is that helped during this emergency, pull everyone together. And you guys talk very candidly about what went well. With your communications team in particular, look at your communication strategy. Did you have a strong plan in place beforehand? Did it work? What did you learn? What can you add? And then pull out your crisis communications plan and update it. We just did this a couple of weeks ago on my team after COVID. So we have just been in the hamster wheel since March of 2020. And we finally, maybe a month ago, stopped. We put our crisis communications plan up on the screen. We went through it and we made some significant changes that we learned during COVID. So this after action review is critical. It will help you be better prepared when the next emergency occurs. And if there's anything I can guarantee you is there will be another emergency. You want to be as prepared as you can. So just remember, during the calm before the storm, that's your planning period. Look at those worst case scenarios. Get to know your news media. Pitch them brilliantly beautiful visual stories while the sky is blue. Build the relationships through quality work every day. And then when your hair's on fire, you have that trust and that transparency built with the news media, and then prepare for the next one. That's all your after action reviews, your review of your crisis plan, your conversations with your teams, and make sure that everyone is in lockstep, better prepared for the next emergency. Well, I certainly hope these tips have been helpful to you. If you are pursuing crisis communications as a career, I applaud you. It is going to be one of the hardest jobs you will ever have, but it's also extremely rewarding to be able to help your business through some of their darkest times. So with that said, I'm going to sign off and just wish everybody a great success in your course and great success in your careers.